This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes.
Welcome to the Bring Your Product Ideas to Life podcast. Practical advice and inspiration to help you create and sell your own physical products. Here's your host, Vicky Weinberg.
Today on the podcast, my guest is Therese Ørtenblad, founder of Small Business Collaborative. So Therese works with product-based business founders who sell to retail stores, and we have had Therese on the podcast before talking about wholesale and how to get your products into stores. So today I've asked Therese to join us to talk about another aspect of selling B2B, which is trade shows. I put a post on Instagram a while ago, and I also asked in my free Facebook group, and lots of you had questions about trade shows, and Therese has really kindly answered all of them, as well as some of my own questions, which were very basic, I have to be honest, but I really think this is a fantastic episode, and if you're even just considering selling at trade shows at some point down the line, I think you'll take a lot away from this conversation. So I would now love to introduce you to Therese. So hi, Therese. Thank you for joining me on the podcast again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So for everyone who hasn't listened to the previous episode, can you please just tell us who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, so my business is called Small Business Collaborative. And for the last 4 years or so, I have been helping small business owners start and grow their wholesale. So anywhere from before you launch your products up till, you're being stocked in the shelves and wanting to expand and sell abroad or whatever it might be. I have a background in sales. So I come from a selling background with it. I know a few people that do similar things, come from a buying background. So we have a slightly different take on it. But yeah, I just run courses and do one-to-ones, mainly to help businesses grow their business and sales, I guess.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I've invited you on today to talk about trade shows, because after I attended, and actually I know you attended the Top Drawer trade show this autumn, I've had lots of questions about trade shows, who they're good for, all kinds of questions. So I don't know the answers, but I know you do, which is why I've invited you on. So if it's okay, I'm just going to run through some of the questions that I have, and we can chat about it.
Amazing. I love trade shows. Even if I'm an introvert, like I know that some people say, oh, I'm an introvert, I don't like trade shows, but I love trade shows. I like to complain when I'm standing there and my back aches, but I like them. So it's a good topic to talk about.
Amazing. I've only been to one, and yeah, I really loved it, and I do plan to go to more. I just think it's brilliant. So let's start out. This is sounds like a really silly question, but let's start by talking about what trade shows are, just in case there's anyone who isn't entirely clear. Maybe they haven't heard of a trade show, or perhaps their perception of what it is might be slightly different. So can we start there, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there is such thing as a silly question. It's, if you haven't been, you haven't heard about it, how are you supposed to know? But for our industry, it is definitely, a place where you do B2B selling, so business to business. So brands exhibit and they have a stand there and they show their products to retail buyers. And there's both large ones that come and visit and small independent shop owners that come and visit. And they are definitely for selling. In some industries, it's more like a meet and greet. But in our product-based industry, you're there to sell. So expect that you will be taking orders if you're going. That should be one of your goals for exhibiting, really.
Amazing, thank you. So what are some of the benefits of exhibiting at a trade show? Why might this be something we want to consider?
I still think, despite all the wholesale marketplace platforms that has popped up the last few years, I still think there's nothing like meeting people in real life, seeing how they interact with your products, getting to speak to them about their business. And there's still no other way that you can meet that many people in such a short amount of time and actually making a real life connection. So I think that is the biggest benefit with them, really.
Amazing, thank you. And I guess it's also great that you can meet so many people in 1 day or 2 days or however long you exhibit at, can't you?
Yeah, and you meet other brands too, perhaps brands that are, new to it like you are. So you kind of help and bounce off each other, or people with a little bit more experience that you have, and you can pick up tips and stuff. So it is a really nice thing to do when you're ready to do it. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about that now. Let's jump straight in, actually. So when is the right time to do it?
So I think that is really, really important that you are ready to exhibit as shows. I think it's really easy to get that FOMO, when everyone goes to Top Drawer, for example. It feels like you should have been there. And it can kind of become a little bit like you get pulled in. And if you start speaking to show organizers, you get even more like validation for that you should be there. But I really think that it's important that if you don't have a big budget, if you have a big budget, you can prepare and you can spend money and get help to prepare regardless. So you can exhibit from, when you launch. But if you don't have a big budget, I would say that you should start to wholesale first and get your first few stockists first, only because then your margins are working, your prices are working, and you're not going to go to the trade show and exhibit and spend thousands of pounds to be there, but for buyers then not to be able to buy from you because you haven't considered your pricing the right way. So I think ideally you have done some wholesale, or you've had some help with your pricing and margins first and having your products retail ready, because I think it is an investment. So those things needs to be considered before you exhibit. One reason why I started my business actually is because I was exhibiting at shows and I was meeting so many small, amazing brands. But then the retail buyers I was speaking to, they were saying, oh, but I can't buy from them because they haven't considered VAT. I would lose money if I bought from them. And I was just thinking, it's so sad that there's no one helping those people. So that was my whole business idea many years before I started, basically.
Thank you. And as well as knowing your pricing and your margins, is there anything else you specifically have to exhibit? So I don't know, do you need I don't know if catalogue's the right word, but do you need like a catalogue or a price list? Is there anything else sort of physical you need? So we won't talk about sort of setting out your shell or your space, but in terms of things that you should have to hand or have ready.
Yeah, I am a firm believer in having a physical catalogue. I know lots of brands are moving away from it from a sustainability point of view, a cost saving perspective, but I still don't think there's anything quite like a buyer walking away with some information that is like a magazine of your brand, really telling your brand story, showcasing your products in a way that you can control, not just what they're remembering, if they remember. And there's plenty of buyers that are just as old-fashioned as I am. And they do like catalogues. If you have a catalogue, you have a price order form that you can give people. There's almost every show I've done, I've given it out on one day. Next day, someone comes back with a filled in order form because they sat down with a glass of wine and, got a head start on their ordering. And I don't think if you give someone a postcard with a QR code, you will get the same.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you. I definitely can see your point about sustainability and why people might choose not to. But I think also because I mentioned I was at a trade show a few months ago, and I came back. I'm just actually looking at the pile of stuff I came back with, just walking around, and a lot of it gets lost. If you get a little business card or a flyer, it's not quite as appealing as the brands who give you even if it's like a leaflet and it's just got a bit more information on there, just a few pages even. Those are the ones that to me, I remembered more afterwards.
Yeah, and that's what you want, right? You want the buyers to go through all the things that they gathered at the show and remember you. Your business card is not going to jig anyone's memory about what kind of products you make. Well, at least not if you have the memory I have. You do, and then you question, will that person go and look you up on your website? Will they go and check your Instagram to remind themselves of who you are? Or will that be something they intend to do but never quite get around to? And then all the catalogs they go through and then they spent all their budget.
Yes. And is there anything else other than sort of having a catalogue? Is there anything else you can do to make yourself memorable?
I think it's really important to be prepared to sell when you're at the show, not in a sleazy car salesman sort of way, but having practiced how you're going to open up a conversation, how you're going to make it personal, questions that you can ask them to actually get a bit of interaction, because it can be a little bit scary in the beginning. You need to be qualifying those people that stop quite quickly so you don't waste anyone's time. So I think just by being really well prepared, you can stand out. And I think making sure that you have considered how the products will be displayed in the actual physical store. So it's not, it needs to have your brand on there. It needs to look like they can instantly picture it in their shop instead of thinking, oh, how on earth would I display that in my shop? I think if you've thought about all those things, then you're off to a good start.
Amazing, thank you. And in a moment, we'll talk a little bit more about your space and how you might set that out, because I've certainly noticed that there's a real variety in how people choose to kit out their space, and I'm sure you've got some thoughts and some tips on that. Another thing I would love to know before we go into the logistics is, how do you know which trade show to choose? Because in our industry there are lots, and obviously they cost money, so maybe you can't afford to be everywhere, so you pick one. How do you know what to choose? And also, this is two questions, but is there a time of year that's better to be exhibiting at? Because I know, for example, Top Drawer have a spring and an autumn. Do you have any thoughts on whether, if someone has for the year they have enough budget to do one show one time a year, what are your thoughts on all of that?
So spring shows are generally larger than autumn shows, some more exhibitors. Generally big buyers will start buying. They all work slightly differently, but as a general rule of them, they will start looking at Christmas at the January, February shows. So if you want to deal with large retailers in a way and you want to sell them Christmas, I suppose a spring show would be better for you. But if you don't have any Christmas stuff to show them because you haven't planned out your range a year in advance, then I suppose it doesn't matter. Because at autumn shows, people meet also the big buyers looking at next spring and stuff, but you also have retail buyers placing orders for right there and then. So I tend to say that you get more long leads in spring shows. You still take orders for spring and all that, but you get slightly more long leads at spring, but you get more shorter ones in the autumn. But that is such a generalization. So it really depends on what kind of brand you are, what season is the best season time of the year for you, what kind of products you sell, and I guess what's most convenient for you as well. You know, you have, as small business owners, it has to fit into your life as well. But yes, I think spring or autumn, you can have slightly different experience, but I don't think it's a huge consideration on them. You know, which one you should choose. If you can, I would go and visit them first, because there's nothing the same. You know, it's not the same as seeing it online, right? Go and visit a show, see what draws you into people's stand, what stand designs do you like, what location do you like, what kind of layouts do you like. You know, you can get a lot of inspiration by going to visit. It's not always possible. So if you can't go and visit, or even might do both of these things, have a look for who exhibited the show. So if brands that are stocked in your retailers that you already supply, are they at those shows? Because that might be an indication that that's the right show for you. Or ask your retail buyers which shows they visit. And if you haven't started wholesaling yet, or you're just at the beginning of that journey, then at least look for brands that you want to be stocked alongside, that you feel that you have a very similar customer to. And that might be a good place to sort of figure out which show is right for you.
That's really useful. Thank you. And then I guess it's also like the geographical stuff, because there are shows in London, shows in Birmingham, I believe. So I guess it also might come down to where you're located and where you can reasonably get to.
Yeah, there's also quite a lot of smaller regional shows. I would say that they have not been as busy as they used to be. So the bigger shows in London and Birmingham are probably more popular now. But you can also think out, even in London and, you know, Birmingham, you can think outside the box. Like, I have a greeting cards publisher that I work with, and she mainly sells to like farm shops and delis. So she hasn't done like top drawer, but she did the farm and deli show instead. And, you know, she's one of the few card publishers there, but she knows her audience.
That is really interesting. And I imagine there are other sort of shows specific to certain types of retail, are there? So I don't know, news agents, I can't think, different.
Yeah, of course, there's different for different niches. There's like Lee, which is more for garden centers and that sort of thing. Of course, garden centers also visit the general trade shows. So, you know, it depends on which one you want to do. There's pet ones if you make dog toys, or, you know, if you make children's like baby things and children's stuff, maybe it's better for you to go to Playtime in Paris instead of doing, you know, trying to fit into more a general area at Top Drawer, for example. So, you know, those are the sort of things I think it really is easier to figure out if you can visit first.
Thank you. I agree. I think if you've got the time to walk around and just see, I just think it's so inspiring, isn't it? Just walking around and seeing what people are doing, what they're exhibiting, how they set their spaces out.
Yeah. And, you know, you don't have to rush into it. Like, I mean, in fact, like, I think trade shows is one of the few things I see brands rushing to do early on. And that is like, you know, generally speaking, it's going to be a minimum of £2,000, probably a bit more than that, more 2.5, 3. Whereas, you know, if they are looking to get some help with their business, they might come to someone like you and me. But, you know, most of the time they will have a discovery call first, and we're talking about like hundreds of pounds instead of several thousands of pounds. But, that will be a considered decision to invest in help. Whereas a lot of people go to and book a trade show, spending way more money without visiting. And so I would definitely encourage people to visit first.
Thank you. And talking about money, so the £2,000 to £3,000 you quoted, is that to have a space, or does that include actually like fitting out your space as well?
Yeah, so if you have a small space, I would say all in is probably more like 2 to 3 grand for most shows. Sometimes a organizer have like, first time exhibitors kind of packages where you get a little bit of furniture, you get maybe you get some lighting or some a socket, a plug socket or something. Or you might just be getting a shell scheme where it's just a few white walls. So it's good to figure that out beforehand. I would say then to fit out your stand, even if you have some sort of starter stand with a little bit of a table and stuff, I think in most cases it's going to be at least 500 quid or something to fit it out plus VAT, because unless lighting is included in the stand, that's probably going to take up at least half of that cost. And you're going to need some sort of graphics, some shelving of some type, some storage to hide away, your jacket or your bag or whatever it might be. And and then you need catalogues on top of that, transport, storage, hotel, food. So it all adds up.
It does. And I'd love to talk a little bit about this fitting out your show as well, if that's okay, because when you were just talking then I was thinking, wow, logistically, it sounds like quite a job, because unless I guess you're in a position where you can do it yourself, maybe you have to find someone to do your lighting, someone to do carpentry, someone to do vinyl graphics. How does that work? Is that something that you as the exhibitor are on charge, you get this space and you have free reign to bring people in, or do the shows have people who kind of do that? How does that generally work?
You can rent stuff from the show, but it's generally really expensive, and it's much cheaper to source yourself, basically. The things that you can't rent from the show is things like, if you want lighting, and I recommend everyone to have lighting, I do not recommend saving on lighting, but there's 2 ways to do it. Either you rent a plug socket and then you bring your own lights in, or you rent lighting from them. That's something where you can't get away from. You need either or, basically. Whereas if you want a table or a chair or some shelves, that is a lot cheaper to bring yourself, and also usually a lot nicer. I mean, I've been to IKEA a lot of times and come up with very creative ways of using IKEA furniture. But things like Facebook Marketplace, even like used IKEA stuff sometimes, or eBay or that sort of thing. I mean, if you just have cards, for example, it's you could just get some of those little ledges in Homebase or B&Q, or if you need to hang something, you could just get like a rod and some sort of material to hang it, or hooks or whatever, in DIY stores. So I think thinking it's a little bit outside of the box can save you quite a lot of money. I mean, definitely bought planter shelves in Amazon, for example, last minute to put stuff on.
Thank you. And does it work that you like a day or a couple of days before you're allowed to go in and
generally. So like the bigger stands are allowed to come in earlier, but the ones that it has a shell scheme. So there's 2 types of stands in the show. There's space only and shell schemes generally, and the bigger show. And those that just do space only, they will build their own walls and have a contractor do all of that. So they're allowed to go in earlier usually. And then shell scheme are usually allowed, 1 or 2 days before. If you want to paint your stand, you need to make sure that it is a traditional build, so it's a wooden wall, because sometimes they don't do wooden walls, but they have those kind of plastic boards which you can't paint, in which case you would have to get the organizers to clad your stand in wood, or you have to bring your own cladding. So there's a lot of things to consider when you book your stand and how you want it to look. It's also one of the reasons why I think it's so good to visit, because you can see what other people have done. It's a good way to learn. And if you go at a quiet time, people are generally really happy to share how they've done something. Because you're not going to go and copy exactly what they do. But if you ask, how did you get that cladding on your stand? Very few people would say, oh, I don't want to tell you,
Yeah. Thank you. It definitely sounds like there's a lot to think about, because you also mentioned earlier buyers being able to see how your product would maybe fit in a store. So would you recommend that stands are you lay your products out as they might be in a store, whether that's on a shelf or a card rack if they're cards? Do you recommend going into that level of detail?
If they're cards, I think everyone knows how to display a card. But if you have a product like muslins I know is quite a challenge to display. So then you might have to consider it. If they are packed in a box, it's obviously a bit easier. But if they're just with a belly band, you might want to showcase how you would. You might want to bring, instead of one of that product, you might want to bring 6 and put them in a basket or hang them on a on a hook, if that's how you envision it, to just help buyers picture it in their shop. I definitely think it's good to mock up your display at home somehow and take photos, because the first time you set up your first show, you will be faffing a lot more than you think you will be faffing. And everything will take longer than you think it will. So setting it up at home, taking detailed picture of where things go. That way you can also think, oh, actually, it looks a bit empty. Let me bring a couple of extra for there, that sort of thing. So I think practicing and setting it up at home is advisable. But to be honest, all these kind of logistic things, I find small business owners are really good at. I see them all figuring it out. It's more that they forget that, what happens during the show and what happens after the show, because those are the scarier bits, right? I don't know, but a lot of us are very good at getting into the detail and, envisioning what color wall we will have. But when you start thinking, oh, how will I sell my products when buyers come up to me? That's a lot scarier. So people don't prepare for that bit as much. They prefer often, well, that's what I've seen anyway.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And I hope that's really reassuring, because I did get quite a lot of questions about shells and logistics. So I hope that's really reassuring to everyone that actually you've got this, bit will be fine. So hopefully
I'm confident that most of you will be good at it. And, people are happy to share, of course, there's people like me, but other brands that, that's not copying anyone. People are generally quite happy to share where you can get, a bookshelf or whatever it might be. You can get advice on that in Facebook groups and all sorts. But when it comes to the selling and the actual reason why you're there, that is something people often figure that they will figure out on the day. So I think it's better, I think it's definitely something to consider.
And on the selling side, do you have any hints or advice or even just things you think you could say, okay, if you've got these things, you're going to be fine?
Well, the catalogue is one thing, but another thing is just, being able to talk about your products. You probably know your products really, really well, but, think about what is important to the buyers. Make sure that it's prominent what you do, and make it sure that it's easy to look through your range, like having pack sizes and wholesale prices and recommended retail prices easy to hand so that they can see it. If you're busy talking to someone else, think about what questions you're going to ask them, practice them out loud, to find out more about their business so your follow-up can be better. If they kind of stop and glance, like they don't want to be pounced, but they also don't want to be ignored. So you make sure you greet people, eye contact, smile at them. Like a smile goes a long way, stopping people. If you're not that kind of cheeky person that will stop people in the aisles, at least smile at people when they walk by in the aisles, and they might linger slightly longer, and then, open up the conversation with a question. And I think a lot of creators, that bit is uncomfortable to think about. So I think it's really important to talk about it before a show.
Thank you. That is really good advice. And yeah, I know for myself, I think I would feel quite daunted if I was in that situation where I'm at a stand and I have to sell to people. So I guess, yeah, but I think to reassure everyone, your products so well, you will be fine. There won't be questions. As long as you're prepared, there aren't going to be any questions that you can't answer.
No, absolutely. And if it's something that you haven't heard of, you just say, oh, let me make a note of it and I'll get back to you, or ask them, what do you mean? People are generally quite happy to chat on these things. There's nothing that you can't deal with while you're there, and you will get more and more comfortable the more people you speak to, and you will probably find that you get more direct with qualifying them when they come to the stand as the show goes on, basically.
Yeah, and I like what you said about asking them questions as well and finding a bit about more them and what they're looking for, because I think it can be tempting when you're in a sales environment to talk about what you have rather than asking the other person, okay, so where are you from and what are you looking for? And I think a lot of that goes a long way as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you can make notes about it, so you can include that in your follow-up, so that can be really personal, even better.
Thank you. And something else, you mentioned this a few minutes ago. I picked up on it because it was a question I had to ask you, because when I was wandering around a trade show, I noticed that, I don't know if it was 50-50, but definitely some of the stands I went to had prices, so you could see the price of each product. Some didn't. Do you have a view on that?
I prefer prices. It's helpful for the buyer. It's also helpful for you to come across really your products, because unless you have one price point, inevitably you will get flustered during conversations. So by having them there, you can say, oh, that's retail said that, the wholesale price is that, the pack size is that, without having to go and look it up on a price sheet and, lose too much eye contact or start faffing around with your catalogue or your iPad or whatever it might be. But it will make the whole selling process a lot smoother if you have it out to hand. I have worked on stands where we don't necessarily have that, because, for example, I used to sell books and they obviously have the RRP on the book, so we wouldn't have the cost price there. Also, you have so many books, so it's a bit hard, but you learn the key price points, and we would have an iPad system, but I much prefer it when it's right in front of you.
That makes sense, because I guess as well, if someone just wants to find out the price of something, but you're tied up because maybe there's only you on the stand, then they can still get what they need.
Yeah.
Which also makes me think, as I've said that, and I'm sorry, I haven't prepared you for this question, but do you recommend having someone with you if it's at a trade show, or that you do it yourself?
I mean, definitely for setup and breakdown, it's nice if you can get some help. At the stand, it depends on who's gonna, are they going to be as passionate about your products? Are they going to know your products enough? And also, are you, if you get a friend involved, are you guys going to find it more comfortable to stand there and talk to each other instead of being approachable by other people? So it really depends on your personality, I think, and also how big of a space you're getting. You know, you will get to know your stand, build neighbors. If you have to go to the loo or go and pick up a coffee, you guys will cover for each other. So you can do it yourself. So it really depends on how you feel more comfortable. But I do see people go with a friend and then they sit there and they have very in-depth conversation about things that it's, you know, they're not as approachable.
That makes sense. So I guess it's just a case of knowing yourself, and
it's the same as
work.
like, you know, do not bring your laptop and sit in front and look down on your laptop the whole time or on your phone the whole time. That is really not why you're at the show. You're there to meet people. So then you need to be approachable.
Thank you. You've shared so many things about exhibiting. Thank you so much. I have just a few more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One is, do you need to think about any, I'm going to say legal requirements. Legal might not be the right word. So, for example, do you need any specific insurance if you want to attend a trade show, for example?
So you will need insurance, and the shows won't let you exhibit without it. So basically the way they do it, they usually charge you for the insurance. And then if you send them your like public liability insurance certificate, they usually credit you for that insurance. So you never end up paying it, but they need you to have that because legally they may need to check that everyone has it. So you need that if you're going to get someone to help you, or you know, during build up and breakdown, no one under 16 can be in the exhibition hall. So, you know, if you think you can get your 15-year-old in to help you set up and paint the stand, that's not gonna work. But otherwise, I mean, you don't need much there. Otherwise, it's just, you know, if you have people with you, make sure that you're insured and they are insured to work on the stand. And the public liability you need to showcase that you have.
That's really useful. Thank you. Because I guess if nothing else, it's another cost that people may not have thought about. So I did want to check on that. Thank you.
It's a lot cheaper to not get the stand one, but to have it already. And to be honest, if you're at the stage where you are wholesaling and you're wanting to wholesale, you should have a public liability insurance anyway. So you probably have it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I have one final question, if that's okay, and it's quite a big one. So don't worry if you can't think of one. But what is your top advice for anyone considering exhibiting at a trade show? I usually say one piece, but I don't want to hold you to one if you have more.
I definitely think practice selling beforehand. Don't forget about the whole selling conversation. Really think about how you're going to be talking about your products. If you're unsure, I think it's really worth having some help with it. I know it's one of those things like people think, oh, I don't want to spend extra money, but you know, it is worth being prepared. I definitely see a huge difference on the result people get when they haven't had any help, and when, you know, people that I worked with for 6 months leading up to the show, or 4 months before the show and a couple of months after, the way they really, you know, focus on the selling. So I definitely think you are there to sell. Make sure that you have a plan for that.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you've shared, because there's a lot, but I think for anyone even considering a trade show, even if it's a year or two down the line, I think this is so valuable. Thank you so much.
Oh, for sure, because they can go and visit then. Now, you know, even if you don't even want to do one yet, you know, go and visit one. It's fun.
I think so. And I think even if you don't ever intend to exhibit at one, I think it's such a good place for inspiration.
For sure. And just to see other people in the industry and, you know, go with another small business owner and have a day out. It's fun.
Definitely. I really enjoyed my day. I'm all for it and recommending that everyone goes if they have a chance.
There's also lots of talks and stuff, to go and listen to, like with advice about, running a business. So definitely you can get a lot out of going. I don't think it's a wasted day out.
I don't. And I should also mention that they are free to attend as well. If
you're
just going for a wander around.
Yes, they are free. If they're in the UK, they're free.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.